Okay, hi everyone. My name is Alexandra Moecka. I'm a PhD student at the Jagiellonian University, but I also am a practitioner in the publishing world because I run a small publishing house with a group of people in Krakow. And today I want to tell you about the practical project, a very special one, a computer-generated book that was published in print. And it has a number of interesting creative aspects to it that I want to talk about. But first, before that, I would like to give you some context about my interests and how they all kind of converge in this project. So here is the cover of the book I will be talking about, 2x6, and we will explain about the genesis of the title just in a while. And first about me. So as I mentioned, the publishing house I work for is an NGO. It's called Korporacja Hart. And the name is, of course, ironic because it has nothing corporate about it. It's a very small institution, and we like to think of ourselves as experimental, subversive, avant-garde, and our motto is all things unprofitable. So considering that, it's kind of a miracle that we've managed to function for 15 years, but here we are. And it's as you see, this mind map is not a masterpiece of visual planning. It's very, it's kind of a mess, but it presents the spirit of the institution very well, because there's a bunch of activities and they are all kind of mixed together. So apart from being a traditional publishing house that does conventional books, we also have a magazine that centers around new trends in culture and tries to discover new interesting ways of writing. We have a web portal where people also publish literature and e-literature. A whole community of people. We gather together every year at the Havangarda Festival, which takes place every first weekend of October every year. And this is a good opportunity to invite you all. This year we will be having a very interesting Visegrad program. Anyway, and we also have a bookstore in the very, very center of Krakow, but what is interesting for us today is that Korporacja Hart is also a pioneer in publishing electronic literature in Poland. We have published over 40 books, 40 works of various types, and this is something we are recognized for. But maybe I should ask, how many of you are familiar with the term electronic literature? Could you lift your hand? Some, but the minority. Okay, so I will explain that too. So electronic literature, this is the definition I took from the ELO website, the website of the Electronic Literature Organization, is literature that in its important literary aspects uses the possibilities enabled by the computer, either the computer itself or a computer that is plugged in to a network or the internet. So it's really a lot of different forms of creativity, and as technology develops, they also develop, and new forms appear all the time. So some older genres examples of older genres would include hypertext, but there's also poetry, different types of poetry, generative poetry and prose, literary forms that kind of take advantage of specific online media and websites, for example, bots that publish literary short tweets on Twitter. Anyway, so this is a very special field of creativity, because the second generation of electronic literature, because the first generation of electronic literature, hypertext novels, it's kind of like traditional literature in the sense that these were closed works, copyrighted works that were sold for profit. But the second generation of literature, electronic literature, which is happening right now, a lot of it is very open. So the licenses allow free reproduction and remixing, which allows for a lot of creativity that is done not for profit, but for fun. And this is very, very fruitful because people exchange the files online and everything is open. You can use somebody's code. So yeah. And another kind of context is literature. Have you heard about literature? Not literature, but literature with a B? Lift your hand. Ah! Okay, some people from Poland have heard. So literature is, you could say, the opposite of electronic literature in a way, or maybe that's not a good way of putting it, but something quite different, because it's literature that really underlines its material form and uses it to convey meaning. So Ahad has also a series of literary books which are kind of freed from their bound form, and there's for instance a book with 3 backs, or a book that is a letter in a bottle, all sorts of these experiments. It's just books that are the common denominator is that they are conscious of their materiality. So the materiality of these books is not transparent, it's a conscious and very important part of the work. So these are 2 very important terms for the book I will be talking about. And the third context, it's not connected with the Hard Publishing House, but it's something I'm also a member of. I forgot about this one. I have only 20 minutes, and there's so many interesting things happening in Polish experimental literature that I want to strongly encourage you to Google Polish Impact, and this is a booklet we prepared last year at Korporacja Hard, and it kind of gathers all the best examples of Polish experiment in literature, electronic or otherwise. So you can find out that the Polish people have produced the world's longest palindrome, or like stuff like that. I strongly recommend you check it out. It's free online. So yeah. And another project I'm a part of, and that I find very important also for my research work, is the renderings project. It started a year ago at the Nick Montfort's MIT Trope Tank Lab, and that's a lab devoted to studying computers and creativity, like literary computing or creative computing. And it has an exchange program where people can come to study there, like on some kind of scholarship, for instance, Fulbright scholarships. So naturally, people have started doing translations of these works. And in the first phase of the project, 12 literary generators have been translated from various languages into English, and the project attracts attention also to the material side of these. So what computer they were programmed for originally, because some of them are very old, and they were like the first platform was not a PC or laptop as we know it, but for instance, an Amiga computer, yeah? So everything is kind of archived and described and then curated in a way of showing how these works were produced, and through translating them into English, you can kind of, show them to the world, because the world of ELIT seems to be still very Anglo-Saxon, and it's. There's been a lot of stuff happening also all around the world, for instance, in Eastern Europe that people still don't know about, and it's really fascinating and unique. So now you know that translating computer generators is a thing, and I want to talk about one particular generator authored by Nick Montfort, who is an associate professor of digital media at MIT. If you are not familiar with his work, I strongly recommend you check it out. It's very inspirational, and if you are interested in the broadly understood digital media and creativity. So this particular generator that served as the basis of the print book that I'm going to talk about soon, is titled The Two. And it's very simple. It always, this doesn't look optimal. Better, okay. So as you see, it generates short stories that always have two protagonists. For instance, the shopper looks at the cashier. He expresses sympathy to her. One ends up with a broken will, or the police officer nears the alleged perpetrator. She hugs her. They feel better after a good cry. So these are usually very short, like 3-verse stories, where there's always two people who meet, and then there's some kind of interaction between them. And if we look into the code, Piotr, how do I view the code on a Mac? Thank you, technical support. I need a mouse. Very well. And if we look into the code, we see that it's a very simple generator, and the gender is randomly selected each time. So when you think, if you wanted to translate it, many of you here are not native English speakers, so you can now imagine and if you think a while, you will come to the conclusion that there could be a problem in translating this generator into a language that is not, in which nouns are not gender neutral. So for us in Polish, so one of the first translations was into French, and as you know, even if you know a little bit of French, you know that the nouns in French, there's le and la. So basically, the secret of the second line would be given away in the first line. So the French translator, Serge Bouchardon, came up with the idea of translating these, the generator, thinking up only nouns that begin with vowels, so you do not see if it's le or la. So that's the way he tackled the challenge. And of course, Piotr and I did the Polish translation. So in Polish also, you know, most nouns, you know the gender at once. So it took us a long time to figure out a solution. But finally, we came up with a list of gender neutral nouns where you don't know if it's a man or a woman. And the particular thing that we learned was that all these nouns had something in common. They were names of male-dominated professions, like, I don't know, professor, or, I don't know, judge, or, yeah, it seemed to the Polish original translation, like football referee, or film director. So these were like professions where there's a lot of power, and there's still no female versions of these nouns. So if you have a woman director, you call her just like regisseur, just like a male director. And the other group of nouns that you don't know the gender of when said, it's nouns that are used for describing very weak people, like an orphan or like somebody very weak, or a hobo. Yeah, so that's the way we solve this dilemma. And there's also a translation into Japanese, into Russian, and to Spanish, and each translator had to solve this problem on a linguistic level, but also on a code level. Because if you have a language that is inflected, you had to accommodate for the grammar. So for instance, in Polish, when we selected verbs, we selected verbs that all inflected the same way, so we didn't have to write a lot of code in order to accommodate for all the possibilities. Anyway, so as people were producing these several translations, Nick came up with the idea that it would be actually very interesting to put them into a book, a traditional printed book. And he asked each and every one of the translators to write a short explanation of the problems they came up with. And I have a PDF of the book with me because actually it premiered only a month ago in the US, and when I was departing for the summer school, it still was in the mail. So it was a very near miss. Okay. But I just want to show you how it looks. Will this happen for me? Okay, here's the Finder. Here's the PDF of the book. So it's a book of poetry where you have the outputs of the various translations of this poem mixed. And of course, the generators are translated, but the output is always different. So it's not, the combinations are different. It's always a different story in each of these languages. And it goes on and on and on for 200 and something pages. And in the end, you have explanations from the translators. So it's a work where the translators are very visible, and they are all listed as authors on the website of the publishing house, which is no ordinary publishing house, by the way, because it's Vanessa Place's Le Figue publishing house. So it has a history of publishing very conceptual books that often have this not for reading from A to Z side to them. And this book definitely is a type of book that you do not read from A to Z, but kind of, shift through. Well, also due to the fact that most readers won't know all the languages that are featured in it. Yeah, and as I said in the beginning, I gave you as a context the idea of materiality of literature, because I think it's really a meaningful gesture to print it out and sell it as a book of poetry, a very well published book, as a statement, that kind of nobilitating and then legitimizing this type of literature, because it's creativity as any other. And what we discovered also at our publishing house is that even if you have a book of electronic literature, when you print it out as a traditional codex book, you may get more attention from reviewers and critics. It's just the magic of paper. It's not the first computer-generated novel that I am participating in, because Hart also published one computer-generated novel last year, and compared to the works that we have only online, a printed book that was generated by a computer gets like huge press because you can send it out to a critic. Whereas if you only have a link, they just do not take it that seriously. So I'm hoping it hasn't gotten much, 2x6 hasn't gotten much reception yet because it's only been premiered, but I'm hoping that it will make a lot of noise and attract a lot of attention. I'm sure that all the 6 groups of translators will be promoting it in their respective countries. Yeah, so that's it for my presentation. Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.